fires everywhere, left and right. You could see some houses burning down, and you just wanted to get out as fast as possible.
It's that, and just, your entire life is gone.
Wildfires in California have driven thousands of people from their homes. While fire crews have made some gains, there's a growing threat from strong winds. The U.S. National Weather Service describes today's Santa Ana wind as remarkable and dangerous, saying they could gust to 95 kilometers an hour. That is especially concerning for those who are fighting the Getty fire in LA and also the Kincaid fire to the north, which is in wine country. My next guest has spent the last 2 days with the crew of Cal Fire, documenting the sheer destruction. His name is Stuart Palley. He's an environmental photographer. He is the author of Terra Flamma, Wildfires at Night, and our chase team has reached him in Newport Beach, California. Stuart, I'm glad you're taking the time to talk to our audience here in Canada. I got this for you. You're shooting all these videos, you're taking all these pictures. I'm interviewing people, they're sharing stories. You are telling the same stories through the pictures. What is the story you are telling of these fires?
Well, right now, of course, these fires are pushed very heavily by strong offshore winds, which are typical to California in the fall, which leads to this extreme rapid spread of the fire. And it moves so quickly that firefighters have trouble keeping ahead of it. The fire is spotting over a kilometer in front of where the fire front is. So we're seeing, due to climate change issues, these fires are becoming statistically more common in the fall.
And as you look through your lens, whether it's a video or a still camera, what is actually going through your heart, not your head?
Well, of course, these fires very viscerally affect me. Anytime somebody loses their home, that pit that you feel in your stomach never changes, whether it's a modest home in the countryside or a mansion down in Malibu. Every time someone loses their home, it's their hopes, their dreams, so many things that they've worked for. And it really brings a strong human element into this, especially when the civilians are fleeing as the fire is coming, because sometimes they don't get an evacuation notice when the fires move quickly.
When people are leaving their homes, do they ever see you taking pictures? Because I'm wondering if anyone has said to you, "Hey, guy, get out from behind the camera and help us."
Occasionally, I will encounter folks who are leaving, but usually they're so focused just on their safety and survival that typically there's not a conversation. In the past, I've actually had to knock on doors to tell people to leave or to evacuate in extreme situations. But typically, my role there is to make the pictures and to share the story with the public who may not be there, to help educate people of what's going on and the issues that California is facing with this acute effect of the climate crisis. But for the most part, folks who are affected by the fires are still incredibly kind and gracious, and I'll sometimes offer them a bottle of water or Gatorade or something like that. And what's funny is they're so generous. They're the ones who are evacuating and having their homes threatened, but they'll say, "Hey, would you like a water or something?" So I think the humanity that we see in this and people coming together is a really powerful silver lining to this tragedy.
Just as we introduced you, we were talking, Stuart, about, one of the clips we played was a guy who snapped his fingers and said, you watch your entire life gone just like that. It's incredible to think of how fast these fires actually move. I want to know, how do you keep out of the way of those flames?
Well, I'm very fortunate to have some formal fire training with the U.S. Forest Service here. So I've got some basic qualifications for a wildland fire. So I've learned about fire weather, fire behavior, communications, and a lot of safety things that you learn while photographing fires in California, because my first priority is to be safe and to stay out of the way of fire crews. And once that's been provided for, then I take pictures. But no photo is worth my life or compromising the safety of crews. And I've developed relationships with crews over the last 7 years of working on this project, where sometimes I'm able to embed directly with them, as I was at the Kincaid fire.
And what about those firefighters, those who are there in those, temperatures that I can't even imagine? They are trying to save the homes and the areas of people they do not know, because that's what they've chosen to do. What is the story your pictures tell of those firefighters?
Well, one firefighter I spoke with who works with Cal Fire in the Sonoma County area was at his daughter's soccer game on a Saturday and got called into work, and he said, "Sweetheart, I have to leave and I have to go into work." And he left the soccer game, and he was up for over 36 hours with a few naps here and there fighting this fire. So for many of these firefighters, this is their backyard. These are friends, neighbors whose homes are being affected, who are losing their houses. And remember, this area was affected very heavily just 2 years ago by the Tubbs fire and the 2017 fire siege in wine country. So people are still very much traumatized from that fire, and to have this happen only 2 years later. I personally have a good friend of mine who lost her home in this fire on the first night, and so it hits everybody close to home, but especially the firefighters.
You know, Stuart, up here in Canada, we watch fires in BC. I've been to BC when the air is thick with smoke, and you know, people who are living there deal with that day in and day out. And there in California, you're having to deal with that around LA with all that thick smoke, you know, in a big city. But you've been chronicling these wildfires for more than 7 years. I just want to get this number right. You've done or shot or videoed more than 100 fires. Is that right? How have things changed? I mean, how does fire number 1 differ from fire number 100?
Initially, I photographed the project because California was in the throes of a severe drought, and as I continue to photograph the fires and learn more about fire history and look into the science behind fire behavior, I realize that there's a trend, especially in California, of fires becoming larger, more destructive, and burning at times a year they wouldn't normally burn. And what we're seeing is that that's very heavily linked to climate change, but also to where and how we build. So there's multiple factors that are influencing the severity of these fires. But with winter generally starting later in California now, there are more days in the fall where the fuels or the brush is drier and it's easier for it to burn. And when we have these wind events, it's hot, dry winds that blow from the interior of the U.S. towards the coast. And if you have something that starts in the mountains, it blows that fire right into subdivisions of Los Angeles where people live.
Stuart, a picture can tell 1,000 words. I want to thank you for your stories and for being on our program.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm very grateful to be able to share the story out here.
Stuart Palley is an environmental photographer, author of Terra Flamma, Wildfires at Night, and our chase team reached him in Newport Beach, California.